Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night, and welcome to my next Peter Hammill video, where today we're diving into the albums that are released in the late 90s. So we've got two albums to talk about in this video. We have Everyone You Hold, which appears in 1997, and we also have This, which comes out the following year in 1998. So I think what's kind of notable about this era is obviously he's moved on from the band style, so PHQ kind of fizzles out. There's a couple of short tours in 1996 where they do the PHQ thing, but by the time we get to 97, I think every show that he performed in 97 was completely solo. So you can tell he's very much in that mindset. Like he'd done the band thing for a little while, and that was kind of getting back to that complete and total self-sufficiency. But I think these two albums and the next two albums as well that come out in the early 2000s. I'll save those for another video, which are None of the Above and What Now. Um, I think you could also include Clutch and Incoherence as well, but I mean, this kind of cluster of albums in the late 90s and the early 2000s really, each album is like another building block that goes towards the production techniques that he utilizes, um, you know, from Singularity on. And in my opinion, I think with Peter Hammill, I mean, he's an artist that has always had, a lot of vitality. Um, but he's one of those rare artists where I would argue that some of his very very best work comes out very very late in his career. I mean, the typical story with artists is they've got that really really exciting creative burst at the beginning of their career, and then they kind of settle into a formula, and they kind of live out their artistic lives from then on. But I mean, Hamill is one of those artists that's always searching, is always looking for something new, and I can't think of that many other artists where Um, their artistic peak comes so late in their career. But I don't think this particular era represents that. But all of these albums, like I said, they're kind of building blocks, and you can kind of see him, um, you know, establishing these techniques, which become kind of the hallmarks of his second classic period, which I would consider to be Singularity forward. Really, I mean, all the albums that he released after Singularity, I think, are sublime, and they're very very good stuff. But yeah, one notable thing that happens in this era as well, in November of '96, Hamill does the Union Chapel concert with Guy Evans. They'd done solo concert or duo concerts, I should say, in the late '80s, which produced some kind of cool, eclectic experimental stuff. But what's notable about the Union Chapel concert, of course, is that it was represented the first time that Van der Graaf Generator actually performed publicly. Like the classic lineup would have been the first time since 1976, so a solid 20-year gap there. And of course, that's brings up all kinds of anticipation about a potential reunion, which takes 9 years before that comes to fruition. But certainly a notable thing that happened in this period. And how much that influenced his solo writing, I'm not really too sure, but in any case, it's an interesting period to talk about, so might as well dive right into the albums then. So, 97, we get Everyone You Hold. This is I've always really enjoyed this album. It's I mean, I don't think it doesn't seem to get as much love as other albums from this period, but I've always found it particularly strong. I think you know had I been aware and cognitive and following music at the time, I would have found this very very fascinating, especially coming after Roaring Forties and X My Heart, because this definitely you could almost look at this as like a follow up to Fire Ships. This is the next album in that sequence of the chamber style that he established. I mean, you could talk about the Be Calm, A Loud series, whatever, and I guess in some respects, Be Calm ends up winning the battle, so to speak, and that he does kind of stick with this chamber style for the most part after this album. But because this is the first album in three albums where he's doing that style, I could see it being quite exciting and quite interesting. There are some light band elements. He does have some guest contributors on here. David Lord, who was very an essential aspect of the Fireships album. He does do a little bit of work on the title track on here. We also get Hugh Banton, who makes an always welcome guest appearance on a Hammill solo album. I think this is the first time Hugh Banton's on a Hammill solo album since Skin, I believe. There's also a few tracks that have Manny Elias doing some drums and percussion, and we also get Stuart Gordon on a couple of tracks. Notably, there is no David Jackson on here, which is kind of interesting. I guess it was, I'm sure Hammill would have wanted to have him. I think I could see some flute making some interesting contributions on here, but I guess it was just a scheduling issue, and Jackson wasn't available at the time. But yeah, still, even though we have these guest contributors, putting their, adding their influence, this is very much a solo work, and that's reflected on the album cover as well. I mean, it's just a classic, singular photo of the man himself. But musically, I think this is really, really good. I really enjoy this, and I mean, I've praised Fireships a lot. I mean, that album really, really resonates with me, and I've always thought of this as it's almost like it's like a yin and yang thing going on between Fireships and Everyone You Hold. Both albums, of course, they have that characteristic Hammill seriousness and darkness, I guess. But this album I find much more dark than Fireships. I mean, if Fireships is like the sun version, this is very much the murky night version. I really like there's a lot of these sort of ambient soundscapes that kind of bubble up throughout the album, and they actually link the songs together. So it is very much a through listen. It is a full total listening experience. But I really like those ambient elements because it reminds me a little bit of some of the experimentation of like the late 70s, early 80s. But some of the of course back then he was using tape loops and whatnot to create those soundscapes. He's using he's using the digital technology at this point. But that willingness to try something like that and link all the songs with these ambient things, it reminds me of that kind of experimental era. So that was one element of this album that I always really, really liked. But the ambient, the soundscapes really it creates it creates such a landscape that really characterizes the album. And again, it's kind of murky, it's foggy, it's like the icy version of Fireships in a lot of ways, which I find quite interesting. And again, it really glues the thing together, and it gives you, like I said, that full total listening experience, which is quite good. Thematically, I think I've never really picked up on any like specific themes on the album. There's a few songs that deal with particular concepts. I mean, obviously there's a couple of tracks here that really deal with kind of human interaction and whatnot. But if there is something kind of consistent, there's the word that comes to mind is aftermath. It's almost like the calm after the storm. And a lot of these songs, there's a narrative where, an event has taken place and you're sort of, dealing with the consequences or dealing with the aftermath of whatever that event may be. And the lyrics, of course, typically of Hammill, I mean, they don't give you the narrative explicitly, but I mean, there is that sort of sense of, dealing with and comprehending the aftermath of some sort of event, whether it be, a breakup of a relationship or, some other, major event. But there's a sense of perhaps like a sense of conclusion is a better word to put it. A lot of these songs are dealing with, endings and beginnings, but particularly the ending, and then I think with the very last track in particular. It kind of sums that theme up in terms of, acknowledge what is past and then embrace the future afterwards. And I think that's, if there is a common theme amongst the songs on here, that's probably it. But, one way or another, I've always been very fond of this album. I think there's some really, really good songs on here. There's a few things that I've enjoyed probably a little bit less as I've gotten older, but, nonetheless, I think it's a really good album. I probably enjoy this a little bit more than X My Heart, actually. Not sure if that's controversial or not, but like I said, similarly to Fireships, this one has certainly resonated with me quite a bit. So, we'll discuss the tracks here. So, opens with the title track, Everyone You Hold. This is one of the best things on the album. I really, really like it. Right away, we get that kind of murky, foggy landscape, that ambient sound that opens things up. A lot of EBO on the track, and a lot of EBO on the entire album actually, where he's got that little magnet device that excites the guitar strings, so you can get a cool guitar tone without a harsh pick style or anything like that. And he uses it in a very orchestral way, and it really gives the songs a great color. Particularly in the intro to the title track, which we're talking about now. I think the other thing here is, I mean, mostly piano led. There's very little guitar on here, and again, that's a great contrast from the previous album, X My Heart, which had a lot of acoustic guitar and a lot of sort of lush soundscapes. This is very much, mostly piano songs. Again, emerging from the soundscapes. I keep describing the album. I'm trying to talk about the title track here. So Everyone You Hold, like I said, great intro. I really love the main sort of piano theme that comes in. I think that's very effective, very haunting, very sort of mysterious almost. That simple little phrase, dun, 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 dun. I think that works really, really well. Lyrically, I think it's really, really good. I mean, we're talking about he's talking about sort of human interaction and how every interaction that you have with another human being affects both parties, and where there's an interesting sort of network that we create, and every one of our secrets or elements of our own personality that we transfer to somebody else, we give to that person. That's sort of one element of the lyrics that I've always managed to pick up. But yeah, really, really good. There's some cool orchestrations. This is where David Lord has his brief presence on the album. I think there's some really, really good climaxes of both music and lyrics on here. I think the lyrics work so well with the music in behind. Kind of the whole bit about we wave in distant semaphore, we flag, it's true, but you're still and everyone you hold. I think there's a great kind of climax of both the music and the lyrics there, and I think it really works. And then the very last line as well, everyone you told knows. There's something very haunting about that, and yeah, just a absolutely fantastic way to open the album, and it certainly sets the mood for the rest of the album as well. So great track to start things off. And then it blends seamlessly into Personality, the second track. This is a cool song. I think this is one that I feel it's often dismissed by a lot of Hammill fans, or perhaps overlooked a little bit. I think it works really, really well. It's this is one of the songs that has Manny Elias on the drums. It's definitely not a rock song though. It's almost got this. It's not jazzy, but there's something. I mean, jazzy is like the only word that I can think of to summarize it. But it is very, very, it's got a very gentle groove to it, but it's a really, really cool song. I like lyrically how it does seem sort of connected to the opening song, and he expands that theme of human interaction, and he applies it on a sort of a more macro scale over here. So obviously, as the title implies, he's talking about personality, and how it's our own self-conviction and self-belief that determines the personality that we project in the world around us. But he takes it, like I said, to a very macro level, and he's almost looking at all of humanity as refractions and fractals of itself, and using every individual's personality as a small piece in a larger puzzle, if that makes any sense. But I think it's a great lyric. I think it works really, really well. There's a few lines in there that I really, really dig. In the gene pool drowned. That's one line that always hit me pretty hard. Some great guitar playing on here, actually. Hammill does one of his sort of pseudo solos, and again, I've said before, Hammill will never be considered, one of the great guitar players, but he has learned to he's learned to manipulate the instrument in such a way that it absolutely fits what he's trying to do. But particularly when the drums first come in and we kind of lock into that gentle groove, I think some of the guitar lines that he puts in there are really, really good. Probably some of his best up to this point in the catalog, for sure. But yeah, I also like the tune percussion that comes in there. I'm sure that's just like a sequence that he's playing, or it's just a pad on one of his keyboards. But I think that also kind of contributes to that sort of ambient jazzy quality. And yeah, really really good song. I'm a big fan of Personality. Hugh Banton is on this track as well, doing some organ. I believe it's Hugh Banton on there. Although his contribution later in the album is much more intense, but we'll get to that in a few songs. We'll move on to the next track. Track 3 is Nothing Comes. I really really like this. This is one that has remained in his live sets fairly consistently. I mean, it's not at every show, but it is one from this album that does get a fair amount of live showings. Really great tune, very very minimalistic. This is just Hammill at the piano, and then some lovely light orchestration by Stuart Gordon on the violin, and it's almost what comes to mind a little bit is maybe something like something about Isabel's dance, but this is the piano version. I think it's really quite good, and Hammill or Stuart Gordon, he's such a fantastic player, and he just knows just the right way to enhance a Hammill solo composition. Really, really intimate vocal as well. I mean, when in the stereo space, I mean, he's singing in his lighter sort of tone, but that voice is right there. I think the production on this is really, really good. Lyrically, this is kind of the first time we really kind of see that theme of, I guess, sort of beginnings and endings, or particularly endings. This seems to me to be reflecting on the end of a relationship perhaps, and just when as one of the lyrics implies, when everything's over, nothing comes as a shock. So I mean, obviously, there's been some sort of tumultuous happenstances taking place, and finally it's reached this point where you've reached the end, and again, there's nothing comes as a shock, right? There's a really nice sort of melancholic nostalgia to the piece as well, like particularly the line, you remind me of the girlfriend I never had, never fitted the equation, I was never quite one of the lads. There's very much a sense of, looking back fondly, but with, just that little trickle of melancholy, and I think that's quite effective. Again, another one of the great songs on the album, in my opinion. One of the shortest too. I think it is the shortest actually, coming in at just under 4 minutes. So yeah, very good classic Hammill track in my opinion. And number 4, track 4, we get From the Safe House. This is where the album kind of gets a little bit darker. There's something I've always found very apocalyptic about this song. But again, we're in that where he's operating in that chamber style, so it is still typically quite gentle for the most part. But there's a very ominous feeling about the song, and I get that from the lyrics, obviously. But the lyrics in this case, again, this is what I was talking about. How Hammill never lets the narrative come out in a totally clear way. But what I get from the lyrics here is, I mean, there's obviously a group of people that are in a safe location that are observing some sort of potentially horrific or tragic event. Again, there's a sense of something apocalyptic is happening here, and it perhaps is there's an element of survivor's guilt in the lyrics. I'm not really too sure, but it is quite effective. It's not one of my favorite songs on the album, but it's again, there's people in a safe location that are sort of saying, we're all safe, but they've obviously witnessed something very tragic or unfortunate. They've survived and other people haven't, and they witnessed it, and it's they're in the safe house and the people that they're observing are not. That's what I got out of the lyrics. Perhaps I'm way off base. I'm sure someone will correct me. A good old hardcore Hammill fan out there will know better, but that's the beauty of his songs, right? I mean, there is no one meaning to any of the songs. They're like Swiss cheese. There's lots of holes in the songs to apply your own interpretation. But that's how I've seen That's how I've viewed From the Safe House, but particularly towards the end where we get the backing vocals kind of intermingling, like, are you ready? No, you're not. And then sending clear. Again, there is a real good sense of drama on there. That's another element of this album, I think, that really, develops further towards, his later career, and that he is placing much more emphasis on the backing vocals here. And again, it's probably, a product of, going, totally, or not totally solo, but operating under a solo capacity again. Is that, obviously he's got a whole arsenal of instruments that he can use, but he really starts working with, creating texture with just the backing vocals. And he does a couple albums later. There's one example that really sort of, seals the deal, so to speak. But yeah. Anyway, we'll move on to the next track. So From the Safe House, not one of my favorites, but certainly very effective, quite dark. And then we get to track 5. So we get Phosphorescence. And again, in the sequence of the album and the total listening experience, I find Phosphorescence to be quite excellent. We've had that darkness with Nothing Comes, or sorry, the melancholy of Nothing Comes, the darkness and tragedy of From the Safe House, and then we get one of those great love songs smack dab in the middle of the album. He kind of repeats that formula because that's kind of what happens in the sequence of X My Heart. But Phosphorescence is really, really nice, and it is a very happy, optimistic, it's a classic love song. But he's getting right into those nitty-gritty details, and he's kind of detailing, he's kind of focusing on, I was listening to this album when I was quite young, so there was, young relationships, and we say nowadays, you kind of like your honeymoon stage, right? Where you have those moments with somebody, and you're truly intimate with them for a moment, and not necessarily in strictly a physical way, but you really feel your souls sort of entwine, and it's those fleeting moments, and you can stay with that person for the rest of your life, and engage in a really, really, a really, really loving and engaging relationship. But it's those moments of kind of perfect harmony and bliss where, as Hammill says, the souls kiss. And I think he does a very eloquent job of describing that. Musically, it's quite pleasant. We get some more Stuart Gordon on here. He does a little bit more orchestration. There's some extra overdubbing to create a little quartet, and it's quite nice. It's I don't know if I'd call it like a darkness, but there's a certain intensity to his voice, even though it's very intimate and it's very much in that chamber style. The verses there's something very serious about his vocal tone there. But there's some really pleasant flourishes as well, like, You Can Tell Me Everything You Want, that whole sequence there. And again, Stuart Gordon's violins are elevating that to a really, really nice, fantastic degree. I love the imagery as well, with ships on the horizon, on the sea and whatnot, and they leave a trail of phosphorescence. And again, it's those brief moments in time where you're truly intimate on a very, very deep soul sort of level with your partner. That leaves a trail of phosphorescence, which can carry on through the rest of your relationship and the rest of your life, right? So very, very pleasant and very positive, happy Hammill song. His daughters are also present on this song as well. We get some very high soprano singing as well, which I think sounds really, really good. It's cool that he has his or two of his daughters anyway are on the track. So I think that's quite cool. I think they actually get a writing credit. Actually, I got to double check that because I like to know, and as I'm freewheeling these videos as I do, suddenly I get to a point and I think, geez, who wrote that stuff? Phosphorescence was not one of his daughters, Cosentino. I apologize, I'm not sure who that is, but he co-wrote Phosphorescence. And then it's Personality that is co-written by Holly Hammill. I believe it's Holly, one of his daughters. So apologies there. I got that a little bit muddled, so to speak. But that's enough about that song. Great love song on the album. It's a great little bit of breathing space on the album, and it very much it alleviates some of the darkness that's established on the first half. So then we move over to track 6, and we're kind of right back in the darkness again. We get Falling Open. This is one I was always quite fond of. This strikes me as, again, probably the most experimental track on the album. This seems to be one of those found songs where, again, he's just messing around with different sounds and whatnot, and he just kind of constructs this again, murky, foggy sort of landscape. Um, and it's there's a real menace to this one as well. Again, it's still in that chamber style, but particularly like the pizzicato sounds that he does. I think it's a pizzicato, so maybe it's just like the bass that I'm thinking of, but it's an acoustic bass. I'm assuming it's a patch. Maybe he's playing one, but yeah, definitely a great air of menace on this one. Almost reminds me a little bit of On the Surface from Out of Water. Probably not quite as effective as On the Surface, but it is still really really good. Lyrically, I think it's another really great marriage of music and lyrics on here. The lyrical vibe that I get from this is very much one of the loss of one's faculties, right? I mean, we obviously always have, a rough idea as to our own narrative and what we're doing in our life and what we want to have in our life and how we're going to go about getting that. But we all also have those moments where, our faculties are impaired and we just feel totally lost. And it's this sense of perhaps loss of control of your own life, so to speak. And there's some great lyrical elements where he's talking about, dropping the script and suddenly, you're just in this very sort of vulnerable position, and that's kind of where the title comes from. All of the pages are falling open, so you've got what you think is an organized life, and then it all just blusters away in the wind, which that's pretty universal thing if you ask me. But again, really good song. Like I said, good marriage of the music and the lyrics, and yeah, very effective. Very dark as well, but again, the sequence of the album kind of keeps you engaged without falling totally into despair, as the uninitiated perhaps might. So we'll move on to track 7. We get "Bubble," another song that has received quite a bit of live performances. I can see why, because it is a very very good song. This is very much kind of the classic Hammill piano tune. But for some reason, there's something about "Bubble" that really reminds me of like some of the piano things on In Camera, particularly like "Faint Heart in the Sermon" or "No More of the Submariner." But it's certainly it's fitted for the 90's, we'll say. And I think it's really quite good. The verses have this sort of almost kind of dreamy quality, and then when we get into the big choruses, it's like that big slam down of reality. And this is where Hugh Banton comes in and puts down his very very intense organ. Again, there's a very apocalyptic sound to it when the organ pops up in "Bubble." And again, very, very effective. I think this is, lyrically, I think this is really strong as well. I mean, obviously, you can think about it on two levels, and the two main verses of the song, I feel, analyze both levels very, very well, and that, it's dealing sort of with, I think expectation is probably the wrong word, but a sense of safety and security, and how that bubble is always going to burst. I guess expectation kind of works into it as well, where you're riding a wave of good events, so to speak, and you kind of have this expectation that there's no reason this should ever stop, but inevitably the bubble is always going to burst. And I think what makes the two verses really effective is that on one hand you've kind of got that on a very personal level, but then there's also a very universal level, and looking at how how long can the human race as a whole keep up this comfortable lifestyle that we've made for ourselves? At some point that bubble is always inevitably going to burst. And again, there's a great blend of the music and lyrics, and like I said, the verses tend to be quite dreamy and airy, and there's this sort of sense of blissful ignorance as you rise up, this bubble that you're riding, or this wave of safety, security, positive vibe, whatever you want to call it. And then when the verses hit in, it's that slap down of reality, and that everything is transient, everything is temporary, and at some point that sense of security is going to come to an end. So I think it's a great piece. Still reminds me of kind of like early mid '70s Hamill solo stuff, but updated for the '90s. And yeah, great track, and a very, very much one that is worthy of uh, you know regular live performance, or at least semi-regular live performance. And then now we kind of come to the close of the album. We got two more tracks left. Track 8, we get "Can Do." This is one of the tracks where when I was younger, I was this is one of my favorites on the album when I was younger. But the older I get, the more I sort of see perhaps it's the weekends to it. I don't want to call it filler, but I mean it seems like it is. It was sort of inserted there for the express purpose of keeping the flow of the album going, right? So again, with Falling Open and Bubble, we do have a lot of darkness, so there we need to have something that's a little bit more up, so to speak, to before we close the album out. This is another one that almost approaches a band style. We got Manny Elias again doing a gentle groove there. There's some cool guitar playing as well. Like I've always found that kind of cool, hearing Hammill doing that riff, that it's very un-Hammill like to a certain degree. But in the context of that gentle kind of light groove, it does work really, really well. I find that the way that this song is placed in the album is quite interesting as well, because we do get that there's a certain symmetry to the album, right? I mean, the second track, Personality, has kind of got that light groove, and then Can Do is the same thing. We get a couple of dark songs on tracks 3 and 4, 6 and 7. We got the ballad or the love song at track 5. So there is a great symmetry to the listening experience here, and Can Do certainly contributes to that. So it is. Filler was too harsh a word to use there a minute ago. It's certainly not filler, but probably the weakest thing on the album, if I'm totally honest. Listening to it nowadays, many years after I first heard the album. But it's all right. There's a few kind of good lyrics here. I feel if there's a lyrical thread, it might have something to do perhaps with Confidence, the song from And Close As This. And it's just talking about. It's a combination of like the song Confidence, but there's also he's kind of also tying in themes of free will and fate and whatnot, and how we all have the free will to determine our own fate and whatnot. And I think that's really, really good. There's a really great line that I really, really like, and it still resonates with me on this song, where what does he say? When the long wave of the future breaks, we're all transmitters and receivers. And I've come to think of the world and the human experience as something very much like that. We're all sort of in this big electromagnetic blob, which is our universe, and within the context of that universe, we can influence it, and we can act upon it, and we're always receiving information from the outside world, and we're always transmitting that information in terms of how we act and what our intent is and whatnot. That's a whole topic that is totally separate from music, but I've always really liked that particular line, and to this day it still resonates with me. So that alone gives Can Do some points, even though it is probably the weaker link on the album. Anyway, we've made our way to the final track, which is a song called Tenderness. Another song that has received lots of live performance, which is good. The one time I saw Peter Hammill solo at the Pepperjack Cafe in Hamilton, Ontario, would have been 2008, I think it was. He did play Tenderness, but I had only heard 2 or 3 Hammill solo albums, so when I went there, all the material was kind of new, which is probably a strange way to experience a Hammill solo concert. But as far as I know, it was the last time he played solo in Ontario, Canada. So, he was either seeing him then or never, because I don't think I'm gonna get the chance to cross the pond just to see a Hammill solo concert, unfortunately. But if he does come back to Ontario, I will be going to that. But yeah, Tenderness I think is a really, really good song. Very, he's back in that piano mode, and I think it's really, really good. The narrative on here, I mean, for the most part, it seems to be an outsider looking at perhaps the breakdown of someone else's relationship. So it's not being told from the perspective, of somebody in the relationship. It's somebody observing and then offering, well, tenderness and understanding and openness to, the person that's going through this sort of unfortunate event. There's so many holes in the lyrics. There's so many, opportunities to apply your own uh, perception of it. But like there's the one line, I'm not as matched, this I confess, still I offer you tenderness. So perhaps the narrator is in this relationship, perhaps he's not. The only other thing that I'm not sure if I read this somewhere, if it's just something that kind of popped up in my own mind, but I've often wondered if tenderness is another father-daughter song, where it's kind of a father watching his daughter, you know overcoming a relationship breakdown, or a relationship coming to an end. With that, I'm not as matched. I this I confess. Obviously, being the father of a daughter, there's that whole process of giving your daughter away to whoever her partner is going to be. So, but perhaps that's an element to it. But in any case, yeah, it seems to be an outside observer, offering emotional support to someone who is going through an ending, which does seem to be a big theme of the album. There's lots of stuff that's coming to an end, and then he really drops furthers that point at the end with that repeated line, remember and let go. So it's about acknowledging the past, recognizing it, letting go, and then embracing the future. So even though there's some dark moments on the album, this is very much about looking forward, I think. I really like the very end of Tenderness as well. There's sort of a fake ending to it, and then we get some more of those sort of experimental soundscapes that come in, and that's again one of the reasons that I've always been so fond of the album. Because really, it's the first time in a long time where he's done stuff like that in the context of like an album of songs. Obviously, he has the Sonics album that comes out, I think, in '96. I'm not really too sure, but yeah, really, really good close to the album, and a very excellent album overall. Very worthy in the catalog, in my opinion. So that's Everyone You Hold. I feel I've said but like 500,000 times during this video, but I've probably done that at all the other videos as well. So if you're watching this and you're enjoying what I do, then it's just what you get, right? I improvise all these things as I do them. So anyway, I can't get too rambly. There's still one more album to talk about in this video, which is this. I've always found that kind of a funny title, to be honest. It's a strange title for an album, but very much a Hammill title as well, and that there's so many meanings that could come out with that can come out of that. And yeah, this is the first time where he's. This is honestly a very strange album to me, because when you read about it, they talk about how he's kind of continuing on that chamber style, and he is for the most part, but there's a little bit of everything on this album. Hammill talks about the recording of it and how he was kind of taken by he writes it his newsletter at the time, a conspiracy of numbers. So it's this weird lining up of numbers. So this would have been his 30th year in the music industry. He turned 50, or he was 50, or in his 50th year, and what is it? Is his 20-something album? I should have confirmed that, but in any case, the numbers sort of line up in this very, very strange way. So I mean, he turns 50, his 30th year in the business, and it must be his 20th album. I think it's probably his 20th solo album, but correct me if I'm wrong. I might be wrong there, but in any case, he was very conscious of that, and he talks about how he tried not to let that influence the creation of the album. But when you're conscious of something, of course there's going to be some level of influence if you're working on a creative project, right? So and I think I can see how, his awareness of all these numbers and how everything sort of lined up. I think it did influence the album a little bit, because this is almost, it represents all of the key elements in his career up to this point. And the end result is something that's very, very disparate. I think it's a very, very good album. It kind of creeps up on me. It's one that I often forget about, and then every time I throw it on, it's like, holy, that's a really, really good collection of Peter Hammill art. But it almost reminds me of the album as a whole almost reminds me of that period in the early 70s, like, you Chameleon in the Shadow of Night, Silent Corner and the Empty Stage, and In Camera. It's almost like the 90s version of an album like that. Of course, in the 70s, I mean, his albums were always very disparate. I mean, you get a crazy song like, A Louse Is Not a Home on the same side of the record as Rubicon, right? And you get, big heavy prog songs, you get the odd rock song, you get some acoustic songs, you get some piano songs, you get, a little bit of everything, and that's very much what he does on this album. Although what he does, the element of Hammill in the 90s that is impressed on here is that he uses these little fragments of songs to kind of stitch the album together and give it a sense of continuity. It's a way to kind of stick all of these very disparate elements together and create something of a coherent whole. But in any case, I do think this is a very, very strong album. It's funny. I think objectively, this is probably a cut above Everyone You Hold, but in terms of my own taste and my own Hammill preferences, I've typically gravitated to Everyone You Hold. If I'm not listening to Hammill for an extended period of time and I'm just like looking at the collection, I tend to gravitate to Everyone You Hold as the better album. But every time I actually sit and listen to them back to back, it's like, no, this is a really, really good thing. But yeah, we get there's some band elements on here. There's like, echoes of the PHQ. There's some experimental stuff on here. There's a really, really great ambient thing on here. We get some, solo guitar stuff. There's at least one piano thing on here. So overall, a great sort of summation, a summary of all the parts that have made Hammill the artist who he is as of 1998 when the album comes out. The album cover's a bit strange. I think it's meant to represent time passing. We get one of those sleeves in here that I've never been particularly fond of. I've never liked the poster style sleeve. I prefer a little booklet. But all kinds of interesting random objects that represent the passing of time. So we get, some old coins, obviously a tree stump, and the spirals that go in there. I believe that stopwatch belonged to Hammill's, either his father or his grandfather. That's kind of interesting. Some aged wine corks, which is kind of funny. Seashell fossils. A very, very Hammillian album cover for sure. Obviously time is one of his great obsessions as a lyricist, so it's only fitting that he should put together an album cover that visually represents that aspect of his writing. So, we'll dive into the songs here. So it opens with one of the fragments. I believe all of the fragments are taken from the song Unrehearsed. I might be wrong, but they're all just kind of like, little, chunks and nuggets that are taken out and they're just kind of put into the sequence of the tracks. But the opening always reminded me a little bit of A Better Time from X My Heart, and that we were immediately confronted with Hammill's kind of choral thing that he does with his voice, which I think is pretty cool. Interesting way to open the album. But only 46 seconds before we go into the first proper song of the album, which is Unrehearsed. And this features the return of David Jackson. So after being absent for at least one album, David Jackson is back, and the first thing we hear on Unrehearsed, the song proper, is a lovely little saxophone flourish, which I think is really cool. And Unrehearsed, I think this sort of represents the epic style. It's not a huge epic, but just over 7 minutes long. But there's a lot of song in it. There's lots of different parts to it. It's for the most part very much led by the piano, but I do like that it has it's multi-part, even though it's not as big an epic as some of the stuff he did with Van der Graaf. It certainly represents that style, I think. I think it's quite effective. The big instrumental section in the middle, that's when we kind of get into the band element. We get Manny Elias playing some drums again, which is really, really cool. I think Stuart Gordon is on this track as well, but it's funny that the guest contributors for this one are all very much the PHQ members. So the only players on here are Hammill, Stuart Gordon, David Jackson, and Manny Elias, but they don't play on all the songs. That's what differentiates this from the band albums of the 90's. And that they appear when they're needed, but there are some songs that are totally just solo. But anyway, trying to stay focused here with the song Unrehearsed. I really like the riff section in the middle. I think the lead up to that is really good. I like how the title of the album appears. Isn't this just this? Go on, start, and then boom, the riff comes in. And then it's a really long sequence. And Hammill in his newsletter kind of talks about how he feels that might have been a little bit too long, but I think it works really well. And then especially when it winds its way back into the main verse, I think that works really well as well. And yeah, it's a fantastic song. And again, very much I think it's a time song. It's talking about the only thing that we have is the present moment, and we're never fully prepared for it, but the best we can do is just make the best of it. Isn't this just this? Go on, start. It's probably a rail against procrastination. We've always got an excuse as to why we can't, dive into something that we might want to do, or initiate something that's going to help propel us to where we want to go in life. There are no excuses. All we have is the present moment. All we have is this. So just you better go forth and do it, no matter how unprepared or unrehearsed you are. So yeah, great opener to the album. This is one that got a lot of live performances, which is very good. It's great that these albums that come out during this period, there's always at least one or two songs that do remain in the set lists, and so something I very much respect about Hammill as an artist. He was not the kind of guy that's gonna write an album and then never perform anything off of it. Although there is one case that's coming up in the next video where he kind of drops all the material after that era, but we'll get to that later. The next song, track 3 in the track listing, but the second proper song of the album, is a song called Stupid. I really like this. This really kind of conjures up the sort of found songs of the late 70's, so I kind of get like, PH7, Future Now, Black Box vibes. The song doesn't go to the extremes of some of those songs from the late 70's. I mean, it's not like a Motorbike in Africa or the Jargon King. It's nothing. It doesn't quite go to that extreme, but you can definitely tell that this kind of comes together by just messing around in the studio and messing around with different sounds and whatnot, and eventually the structure sort of reveals itself as he works away with it. There's some really great vocals on here. I love the kind of wild screams that he does, where he's not really doing a melody, but he's just in his own words, just bellowing out a completely undisciplined wail. But I think that works really well, especially with the kind of murky landscape that the song conjures up. Some great sax playing on there, which is really good. I love that there's a little hook that pops up. It's just on the piano, but as the verses come together, we always get that little dun dun dun. Very subtle, but it works really well. But lyrically, we're again kind of talking about. I think there's an element of self-reflection on here, looking back at stupid things that we do in our lives, but it's not looking back at stupid things that are done in a negative sense. It's just saying, when you do something so stupid, there's always that opportunity to learn and grow from it. So there's definitely that element to it, which I think is really good. Yeah, I think it's a great song. Again, one of the songs that I tend to forget about when I haven't listened to the song for a while, or haven't listened to the album for a while, and then it pops up. It's like, oh yeah, this is really quite cool. We get Manny Elias on the drums as well. Kind of provides something of a backbeat to go against all of the random soundscapes that happen over top. But yeah, very good track. And then we get to track 4, Since the Kids. This is an interesting one. So this is, it's essentially just a classic piano ballad, Peter Hammill piano ballad. The piano is very intense at times, particularly the intro. We just get that, very intense chord just, slamming you in the face. And and then the vocal comes on over top of it, and it's quite a compelling song, really. This is obviously the song's called "Since the Kids," and it's talking about a couple that have gone through the process of raising children, and now I'm not sure if it's quite dealing with like empty nest syndrome, but that all the work that they put into raising the kids is now over, and the kids are sort of flying the nest or whatever, and it's just it kind of is about empty nest syndrome now that I'm now that I'm vocalizing and describing it out loud. But it's talking about the challenges that a couple might find in their relationship once all that work is done, because it's like the kids are grown up, they're gone, and you kind of look at each other and you go. Well, where do we go from here? I think there's a lyrical connection with Autumn from Over, but whereas Autumn on the Over album is he's a young man at that time, and he's sort of imagining what it might be like. Whereas by the time we get to 1998, he's singing, he's writing these lyrics through the lived experience. I'm not sure if his kids were fully grown up at this point, but I'm sure. I'm sure it was written from. It has to be written from experience to a certain extent. What I find most fascinating about this song, I mean, even though the instrumentation is just the piano and just the voice, um, I think it's interesting that this is one of his found songs. So it's not a case where he sat at the piano and worked out a chord sequence and put it all together. I think he said he just sat at the piano and recorded about, I don't know, 20, 30 minutes of just pure improvisation. So he just sits at the piano, improvises a bunch of stuff, and then just kind of takes little elements of that improvisation and stitches it into a structure. So even though it doesn't sound like one of the found songs or the experimental songs, its creation certainly owes a debt to that attitude of just messing around, and the next thing you know, a song appears. But I think it's quite effective. It's a very good song. Lots of good drama to it. I particularly like there's the really light piano touch where you just doon 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 doon, and there's some backing vocals in there as well. But there's a starkness to that part of the song where, again, like there's that element of something that was such a huge focus for this couple in the narrative, their children. Suddenly that focus is gone, and when the piano part does that, and like the rest of the song kind of fades away, and we get that little 3-note sequence. Very, very effective, and again, the music and lyrics lend themselves to each other very, very nicely there. So, very good song, good classic bit of Hammill there. Then we move on to the next song, track 5, but the fourth song overall. We get Nightman. This is really, really good. This is something of all the songs on here that really remind me of the kind of early 70s solo period. Nightman comes the closest. Even though so Nightman's got a lot of Stuart Gordon on it. Jackson's on it as well. But it's essentially just a Peter Hammill on the acoustic guitar. It's been a long time since we've had a song like that. I mean, something about Isabel's Dance off of Out of Water is very much that style, but this, stylistically, the way that he's playing the guitar and the way that the arrangement is put together very much reminds me of like a Chameleon in the Shadow of Night, or Silent Corner in the Empty Stage sort of era. So that's really nice to hear that style of song get some representation this far into his career in '98. I think it's really, really good. He played this one live quite a bit. I'm not sure how recently he's done it, but he definitely did it quite a bit around the time. And I really like the lyrics here as well. I mean, I'm something of a Nighthawk myself. I like, not so much anymore since I've had my own kid has come into my life. Like my schedule works around her schedule, as it does. But I've always been, I love the vibe of nighttime. Yeah, there's something about my favorite time of day is probably between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m. because everything else is quiet. The streets are quiet. All of the cool animals come out. You get the more mysterious animals are around, but everyone else is asleep and the streets are silent. There's something about that time of day that I find very engaging. And this song sort of kind of deals with that. I guess Hammill writes, he wrote that it was from a real experience where you wake up in the middle of the night and you I think he's just kind of walking around in the kitchen. Maybe he went outside, but it's talking about that interesting state of mind that you're in, where you're not fully engaged in the actions of the day. You're kind of foggy, but there is a lucidity that is there, even though you're not fully engaged with the day. And I think, in my opinion, it's a very creative time, to be honest. Being in that headspace is a cool experience, and I've always enjoyed that. And I think it's great that Hamill wrote a song kind of specifically about that. But yeah, I think musically, I think it's really, really good. Very, very direct lyrics, actually. In the dead of night I woke. But cool chord sequence as well. And yeah, just a really great song. Quite long as well. I mean, 6:17, and that's for a song that is, essentially just a piano piece with, some embellishments on the sax and the violin. It is quite long, and that's again very characteristic of that, kind of early mid 70s solo period. So yeah, Nightman is a great track. Then we get to the next song on the album. We come to track 6 on the album, but track 5 overall, which is Fallen, the City of Night. Very, very interesting song. In many ways, it sort of carries on, like the sonic landscape from Nightman is carried on for the verses in this piece. But of all the songs that kind of talking again about the whole be calm and A loud concept that he had, this song, it's it's a decently long song, I guess, but for Hamill standards, it's pretty average song length, 5.5 minutes. But I think he successfully combines both the band style element and the orchestral element really, really well on this song, and the verses are very much that chamber style, very much acoustically driven, some nice violin there, but the choruses get very, very intense. Manny Elias comes in with some great drumming. I think that it's very effective. The main kind of violin theme that comes in, dun 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 dun. Almost, I get sort of audio images of X My Heart with that. But I think it's really good. It's in a weird way. I mean, we're kind of in the same wheelhouse as I don't want to. I was gonna say modern, but modern deals with the city as um, you know an imposing, perhaps negative experience on the human psyche. Whereas this is there's that melancholic nostalgia here, where he's talking about how you know as time goes on, the neighborhoods and the streets that we're familiar with change. There's a great lyric from the present album on from Van der Graaf Generator, and a line that's always resonated with me, which is "Another time is another place," and I think that's very much what "Fall in the City of Night" is talking about. The you walk down the street that you grew up on, and it's a completely different world when you're 50 years beyond that, right? I think that's certainly a cool topic for a song, and there's all kinds of layers to the lyrics, of course. What I like most about it actually is the kind of crazy ending at the end. I think it's a sequence thing, but we get that really weird sort of harsh synthesizer tone. Dun, 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 dun. And there's a really cool chord sequence, and it's used very sparingly. It's literally just at the very end of the song, with that boom, dun, 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 dun. I think there's a real great sense of madness and chaos, and I think that's it really represents the aggressive development of cities, and it seems like the rate of change is accelerating when we're talking about the physical landscape of the world that we live in. So I think that's really, really effective, and yeah, it's a great song. Like I said, it marries the be calm and the A loud elements very well in a very relatively short piece. So extra points for that. Great track. And then we move on to the next fragment, Unready. Yeah, and again, this is just some more little bits and pieces again from Unrehearsed, and it just kind of bridges the gap between Fallen and Always is Next. Again, just 42 seconds of it, and yeah, it's there's a little bit more. It's almost a little bit less musical than the other ones. It's just just kind of some cool sounds. But yeah, we that this leads us to track 8 or track 6. It's the sixth song of the album, but track 8 on the playlist. It always confused me the way that the fragments are actually set up as specific tracks, but whatever. The next song we're talking about is Always Is Next. Very, very cool song. This is the next, kind of full band song on the album. The only one that the whole piece is very much in that kind of band element, but very harsh, very heavy. There's some wild guitar work on here. Hammill compares it to like Nadir, like the Nadir era, but I don't really see that. I mean, like, his guitar playing is, for one thing, it's come a long way since Nadir's Big Chance, but I think it's those we was talking about the real wild part, kind of towards the end of the song, where the guitar is just going down, 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 the sort of manic police siren sound, which is fitting because the lyrics is lyrically this is another one of those dark songs. It seems to be from what I can tell is uh, the narrator is describing a cold blood murder over a jealous lover type situation, but again the way that the music is sequenced with the lyrics, it works so well. There's a lot of great drama, and it really you almost feel like you're experiencing the story of this murder in real time. And it's again very, very dark stuff, but it just works, and it's kind of the kind of stuff that you want from like heavy Hammill. And yeah, I think it's really, really good. I guess it's kind of try and remember the lyrics. I don't want to screw it up if I try and just improv it off the top of my head here. But what is it? Where is it? Where is it? A clenching fist, a wrench, a twisted kiss will salvage this wreck. The steam, the windows stream in, and in the back seat of the car, they never suspect. Out in the dark, the Demiurge Avenger, auto-elect. Ill met, the gun is cocked, though once they swore they'd be forever, always is next. Yeah, with that whole lyrical sequence and the way that the music hits that, it's very, very intense, and only somebody like Hammill could put something like that together so well. And there's some tones towards the end of it that really kind of hammer down the tragic element of the story. And it's very, very effective. And again, the kind of song that only Hammill could come up with. One of my favorites on the album, actually. I really, really like it. And yeah, and then we get the next fragment. It's funny. Always Is Next is like bookended by these fragments, but Unsteady, which is the ninth track on the album, just 58 seconds. This is kind of one of the nicer fragments in that it provides that it alleviates the darkness and the intensity from Always Is Next, and we kind of get some acoustic guitar, and this is from the build-up of Unrehearsed. I think it works really well. Again, it kind of takes us out of the darkness that's set up with Always Is Next, and it leads us into the final track on the album. So it's really only the seventh song, but track 10. We get The Light Continent. This is fantastic. This is a very, very unique song in the catalog. He never did anything like it before or since. He's very much working in that sort of ambient mode. I mean, if there is stuff that you could compare it to, perhaps I almost want to say Magog, or some of the soundscapes that he put together on the Loops and Reels album, which I didn't talk about in this sequence in this video series, but perhaps I'll talk about it one day. But yeah, The Light Continent, very much in that ambient sort of mindset. It's very, very difficult to describe. It's a very special piece. 14 minutes long. It doesn't feel like it's 14 minutes. I mean, it's always felt like maybe like a 6 or 7 minute song, but it's because the way that the layers of the soundscape are, they're sequenced in such a way you can really see like a verse chorus structure coming in, but man, it's a special piece. Lyrically, this is one of the very abstract ones, right? He's very much dealing with the concept of nothing, I suppose. You know, let's dive into the lyrics here before I embarrass myself or just start sputtering away, making no sense at all. But I've he uses Arctic or Antarctic imagery to describe the plane of existence that we're all living in. And just how blessed that we are to have to have the fragile fluttering in our hearts that marks us chosen today to defy the featureless. That's the line I was trying to think of. I got this silly lyric thing all out for nothing, and I got the line that I was looking for. Um, you're facing the futureless. What is the opposite of of this thing that we're all in and living through? It's something and it's nothing, and very very intense, very intense and thought provoking philosophical lyric. But again, the soundscape that the lyric rests upon is so good. We get there was the other thing we also get contributions from David Jackson and Stuart Gordon on sax and violin respectively. And the way that he had them perform this is very very interesting. So he gave them two passes at it. The first pass they were not allowed to hear the track whatsoever. They was just pure improvisation and reaction to the soundscape that he created. And then they got one other pass having heard it and improvised over it once. Um, and it works so very well. There's parts of it that almost remind me of Gaia from Fire Ships, but this one is much more intense, and again much more ominous as well. Again the lyrics unroll very very slowly. I love the sequence, with the compass disjointed, the compass down, which again the way that if you just say that out loud, it doesn't have the same menace as it does with when you hear it in context of the music. But yeah, I think it's a great meditation on the difference between this is here, this is now, this is something, and the featureless, the opposite of what this is. Yeah, it's like I said, it's very hard to describe it. I know I did it no justice whatsoever, but it's one of Hamill's greatest compositions in my opinion. It pops up at a strange point in his career. I mean, I wouldn't call the late '90s one of the high points in his career, but the Light Continent is one of those very special things that if you're a fan of Peter Hamill's work and you haven't heard the Light Continent, what is wrong with you? You got to get out there and check it out because it is a very special thing. And with that, that wraps up Peter Hamill's activities in the late '90s. Um, so yeah, thank you very much for watching. As ever, like, comment, subscribe. But I didn't say that because I'm not a conformist. I'm glad I was able to get some more Hamill videos out. There's been a little bit of demand, so I appreciate your patience to the Hamill fans that watch my channel. I know I've been very focused on the Deep Purple thing lately. The way that I do these videos, I mean, back when I was doing it, a few years ago, I'd dive very, very deeply into a discography, and I'm a very obsessive person by nature. So, when I committed to say like, oh, I'm gonna do videos on the Jethro Tull discography, that's all I listened to for that whole period when I was doing those videos, and that's kind of where I've been at with Deep Purple. And I've at this stage I've actually recorded everything except for like maybe the last one or two videos that are going to go into my Deep Purple collection. So I've been very much in that mindset, and obviously there's a really big difference between Peter Hamill and Deep Purple. So I will admit it was kind of a bit of a challenge to get myself back into a Peter Hamill mindset. But I know there's some folks out there that have been very patiently awaiting these albums. So I appreciate your patience. There might be a couple other breaks in the Hamill catalog. As obsessive as I am, it's very difficult to spend very long, prolonged periods just listening to Hamill music. So that's why I've kind of broken it up a little bit. But the next Hamill albums I'll be talking about will be the early 2000s. So that'll be None of the Above and What Now? So, and then I think the next video will be Clutch and Incoherence. And then for the albums after that, because, I said at the beginning of this video, I find like the last few albums that he did kind of post, Singularity and Beyond, probably Incoherence as well. I love that album. It's a very special album to me. Is some of the best stuff in his catalog. So the albums that come out, from Singularity onwards, I might just do like a video per album because it's an interesting part of his career and catalog and all that. So anyway, I'm starting to ramble and rant and rave, whatever. My voice is very sore, my mouth is very dry, so I should wrap the video up. Thank you very much once again, and stay tuned. You will see more in the future. Take care. Bye-bye.